Hi, Pubcon. I'm super excited to be here today with Seth Price. He's the founder and CEO of BluShark Digital, but he's also an accomplished attorney. So obviously, he has some really great perspectives to share with us today. Seth is actually going to be talking about local search in the post-local service ad world, which is definitely relevant. So I will let you take it away, Seth.
Thank you so much, Shelley. And thank you to Brett, Joe, and the entire Pubcon community. This is such an honor to be here. I started my career as a lawyer and basically found Pubcon as a place to learn and grow and network. And I would not have the law firm I have today, nor the agency that I have today, if not for the great people and the great information that I've learned through at Pubcon over the years. So it is just a thrill to be here. You know, I'm excited today to talk to you about what is cutting edge in our world, in the legal space and sort of professional services. Local service ads are everything. And for many of you guys are already in there. So I have to sort of bifurcate this. And basically, I'm going to give you guys the foundation of what's going on for those of you that aren't playing in the space already. But for those of you that are in the space, hopefully give you some great tidbits of what we're seeing, looking at a couple hundred lawyers around the country and what is working, what's not working, what are the hiccups along the way. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Seth Price. I'm the founder of BluShark Digital, which is essentially the in-house team for my law firm Price Benowitz that I launched 12 years ago. I took the digital team out about 5 years ago and created BluShark, which basically where we geek out on SEO for primarily lawyers and some doctors, but really local search is where it's at. So it was great to hear Joy's keynote, and Joy is just she's a joy and has been a friend and mentor in this space. But I'm going to dive right into local service ads, which is the sort of hottest topic in the professional services space, where essentially you can buy your way to the top. So, you know, local service ads, what are they? They appear at the top of the SERPs, even above the local pack. They are paid. They're not organic. They are a pay-per-call functionality. They do not click. You're not paying for clicks. It's only if somebody actually calls through to your organization, and there's a process at the end to dispute leads. Okay. This came out of the legal field, and we're going to talk about this from a bunch of different angles. The legal field calls it Google screened. In the home improvement space, it's Google guaranteed. So for us now, as we see this expand beyond home improvements, the Google screen nomenclature doesn't give people money if it doesn't work, but is giving them some level of confidence. It's kind of an irony, because as a lawyer, or let's say an accountant, you do have an organization that has to verify you're in good standing. That said, Google wants its own check mark, and we're going to get into this throughout the presentation. The history of local service ads. So when I was out visiting Google a couple of years ago, home service ads were all the rage. That's the precursor to what we're dealing with today. Beta test in San Francisco, 2015. And it started, I think the impetus when I spoke to the people at Google was really like locksmiths were so dubious. When I needed a locksmith back in the day, I'm from Washington, D.C., the idea of finding a locksmith, there might be somebody literally in the middle of the National Mall listed as a locksmith. The spam was so prevalent, and finding a legitimate handyman or plumber was a real issue. We've seen a lot of companies build their entire fortunes on that space, and there's so much dubious activity that Google was like, okay, we want a good user experience. Home service ads are needed in order to differentiate what's legit and what's not. So it expanded outside of California in 2017, and it was rebranded as local service ads. So this is what we're seeing today in the LSA, in the legal space. We're seeing the name of the practitioner, the number of reviews and the average, the hours of availability, and then the year established. Each of these things, go into this. We're seeing that to be shown at all, there needs to be a 3.0 or higher. But as you can see, even from this slide, What we're seeing is from a conversion point of view and from getting on there, the number of reviews are certainly important. But what's interesting here is that a larger number of sort of what I call it mediocre reviews. Not that we have the eyeglass store situation, but what we're dealing with here is that a 3.0, which in the legal space is not a great score, that means you have a lot of unhappy customers, is still showing. How that plays out over time was interesting. But as you see, as you sort of scroll over it, the phone number comes up and that tracking number appears and allows people to get in touch with you. And that's how they're monetizing. It's based on this cost per call model. In the legal and professional service space, lead gen has been huge. Many people in the Pubcon community play in that space. I think this is Google saying, hey, there's a lot of money being made in lead gen. Not only are we looking to make more money, period, but this is an opportunity for us to sort of make Google the brand nationally in the lead gen space. So the question, the elephant in the room is, what does this mean for everything? We're going to start with paid search here. What have we seen for people who are doing traditional AdWords or PPC? How has this played out? Because all of a sudden, this is a paid vehicle, and it's really fascinating. Because for us, we're a digital agency, very heavily involved with SEO, but paid search is part of the professional services landscape. And what we have seen is that, ironically, that we're not seeing what I thought would happen, which was that all of a sudden, the organic would really be decimated. But instead, it really seems that we're seeing a shift from traditional PPC ads, the Google AdWords or Google Ads, to LSAs. And that's what we're seeing time and again. The click-through rate for the same queries in markets where LSAs were rolled out is essentially the click-through rate for the traditional PPC is down and the LSA is up. Search impression share and top of page remain consistent for the same traditional PPC campaign. So when you combined PPC and the LSAs together, that is essentially what we're seeing, that hasn't changed meaningfully to date. People are still bidding on the traditional paid ads, but the lion's share of the paid traffic is going to the LSAs. So continuing with this theme, the cost per client acquisition right now is significantly lower with the LSAs compared to traditional paid search, those clicks. So clicks, particularly in our world, are very expensive, some of the most expensive clicks out there. And the LSAs have came in really cheap. We've seen them creeping up, and eventually, and Google has made it no secret that they will move this to an auction platform. But for now, it's almost like they're trying to give you a free giveaway or a discounted giveaway to get you hooked on this product. I have no doubt that the prices go up, but in many markets where the LSAs are really inexpensive, particularly in the plaintiff's practice, some of the most expensive, the injury world, that the LSAs are a bargain at the moment. And for the moment, it's sort of a land grab to see how much inventory you can get. Even people that were not doing traditional paid search, where they didn't like the ROI from the clicks, are buying into the LSA at the moment, because right now there's a window where until those prices go up, it really is a great value. And the question is, can you get, it's not a question of like, how are you bidding? It's really a question of you giving as much money to Google at the moment to allow yourself to get as much possible traffic. Now, I've seen it in certain sectors like the contingency world, the plaintiff's personal injury, medical malpractice, that people really, it's a land grab to get as much as they can. In other areas, it's been a mixed bag, where there are certain areas where fee-for-service people at a higher price point, just like they've never had as great ROI from paid search. Similarly, LSAs, many people have killed it, but there are a number of people in some of the practice areas that are dependent on a higher price point, that an immediate phone call, just like a click, may not convert quite as well, but there's no doubt that there's a volume there for the time being. So they're diverting traffic from traditional PPC campaigns, but we aren't seeing the same effect on organic search to date. So this is really what we've seen. So first, going back to 2015, 2017, we saw the rollout by Google in the home improvement space. And we saw them trying to find ways to essentially protect people from dubious players. We saw the testing in legal, that was originally rolled out in 2019, estate planning and immigration only, San Diego and Houston. That's where they moved from home improvement into the legal space. And it became available really quite widely nationwide, July 2020, in most of the B2C areas. When I say B2C areas, consumer facing law, while some B2B areas, but the area that where the lion's share of the traffic and search is in this B2C community. And that area opened up, and it has been sort of a real learning curve for everybody figuring out how to gain that Google screened, getting that check mark and getting yourself the ability to gain traffic from that has been a huge scramble. Submitting an application with state bar information, a full criminal background check for all employees, and medical malpractice in most jurisdictions. These are the things that people had to go through. And it was one of those things, they were saying it was coming, and then one day it was there, and it was a scramble to get all of that in place. So within legal, we've seen lots of glitches, not unlike other Google rollouts. When it was first rolled out, extremely clunky within legal. Glitches during the sign-up process. Once the accounts were created, the reviews weren't populating, and ads weren't appearing in search queries that would trigger them. It was just a mess. Reviews are clearly an important ranking factor and have, for many people who are playing the PPC game and not worrying about the 3-pack and the local search as much, all of a sudden reviews went from something like, hey, I got my ads, they're going straight to my own properties, I don't care about that Google My Business interface, to all of a sudden, though, that review count was important as a ranking and conversion factor for these LSAs. So, that was a game changer for many people, where all of a sudden they had to start focusing on reviews for their firms. The ability to pick job types within your practice area, whether you're a personal injury lawyer or a medical malpractice lawyer, whatever it was that you were doing, as they gave you the ability to specify those, people were able to sort of get meaningful traffic for what they did. But what we've noticed is when you were willing to take more practice areas, the traffic went up exponentially from just picking a single one, that as you were willing to give them more areas, you clearly saw more traffic. Authentication. So basically, to get this Google screen check mark and be part of this process, there were so many hurdles to overcome. You have to people submitted information that was being denied. The inability to submit an attorney's information was a problem. The Google was changing job types randomly, and headshots that fulfilled all of the requirements were being denied. Delays. It took a long time. You had to gather the information. If it was for a client, you had to get them to get it and get it back to you. Waiting for background checks. The Pinkerton background check in the early days was really problematic. It has thinned out. We're in the middle of COVID when this is all happening. So it was really very frustrating, because you knew you needed to get on there. You wanted to get on there quickly, but that was definitely, there were many other approval delays. And then finally, ads just not going live. We saw glitches, for example, in Connecticut, where people were getting rejected because they weren't with a voluntary bar association. So in the law, there's a bar that you have to join that's mandatory for each state, but there may be a voluntary association. And in the early days of this rollout, Google wasn't differentiating from what is required, and it gives you your license from that of an optional sign up organization. And people had to sort of explain to the person they could get on the phone, hey, you're looking at the wrong organization. Much of that's been smoothed out, but it still was a very frustrating process to get all of that done. So we've put together some materials at lsa411.com. So whether you're just starting an LSA campaign, we have the fundamentals. We have a slide that you can get on common hiccups and solutions in the LSA verification practice, and then a more advanced one of best practices for your LSA. And if you go to the lsa411.com, it'll redirect you where you can get all of those collateral materials. So local search is one thing that has been sort of the epicenter for most of us in the SEO world who are doing professional services and legal. But there, as we talk today, LSA has been a major factor, but we're still seeing a number of things that are in flux. And I wanted to spend some time today, in my remaining minutes, talking to you about local search in the professional services and legal space, and just where we are and basically what we're left with now that LSA is there. The good news is we have not seen this traffic cannibalize the way we have paid search. So people who wanted paid, it's still there. And I'm sure that Google will continue to turn the screws, and there'll be less and less opportunity in organic. But for the time being, we haven't had that ship completely overturned, and that we're continuing to row forward. So reviews more important than ever in the organic local search, proximity of the searcher, keywords in the name, age and authority of the Google My Business account, and local link signals. All those things that many of the great speakers here at Pubcon have talked about and will talk about are there. But it is basically, I am interested to see whether or not, given the spam influx within local search over the years, whether they ever bring that Google check mark, that screen check mark, into the organic search to show you've gone through the background check. Because if they have it right above, why not use that? So for many people who are law firms and not lead gen, this would be a great differentiator to keep spam out of the 3-pack. Obstacles to ranking locally. One of the things that we've seen is filtering. And this is another sort of bane of lawyers' existences, in the sense that in the real world, there may be an office building that all the lawyers are in. It's good for camaraderie and sharing of ideas, sort of the equivalent of Pubcon in a building. It may be across the street from the immigration office. But as you guys know, if you've done this, suppression is a huge issue. So it's one of the things that we've focused on. And I've in fact created a document, because before anybody opens an office, it's almost digital marketing malpractice not to evaluate that building and make sure that there aren't other dominant players that are going to be very hard to deal with, and that your listing will be suppressed. When it's suppressed, only one listing will be in the 3-pack, and the rest of the building may or may not even be visible. You have to scroll in on the map. You're basically in the hinterlands. So at LSA 411, we also have a link for a sort of protocol and best practices when choosing an office, so you don't end up surprised and in a situation where you've done all of your hard work, but you're still not showing because somebody who's ahead of the curve on you with local search is showing, and you or your client's listing has been filtered out. One of the things that I've talked a lot on my SEO Insider podcast, and had a lot of our speakers here on, has been the fact that spam still works and has been a huge problem in local search, particularly in the legal space. And that, it takes up valuable space within that 3-pack, and it's very, very hard to get these people out. You're able to, Google has not been great historically removing that spam. There are many different techniques. You can let them know it's either a fake business or the name isn't right, but getting legitimate businesses into the 3-pack when spam has infiltrated it, which has been prevalent to an incredible degree for years now, and has continued to build, extremely frustrating. I'll give you some positive signs that in putting together this presentation, I had noticed that some of the most abhorrent spam seems to be filtering out by Google. I hope that's not just a blip or the multitude of places we checked recently, but what we're seeing is exact match names are still ruling the day, and that they can be very, very powerful even for a lesser organization. But the real obnoxious spam, where there's an exact match name with maybe a review or two that's clearly fraud done by an outsider, that seems to be on the decline. I hope that stays consistent, because it's extremely frustrating when you have people who are doing everything right. They're building great content. They have great links. They are the authority in their area. And somebody comes up with an exact match domain with almost no content and almost no reviews, and it was popping. We've seen a decline of that. However, any organization that has the exact match terms in its name, that is still a very powerful source. And so it looks like Google is sort of turning the knob, as they often do, trying to balance legitimate listings and spam. It appears it's going in the right direction. Still a long way to go. So here, our final piece of this puzzle, I'm going to share with you a case study. And this brings me back to a lot of the great work that Mike Blumenthal's done over the years in the local space. We looked at an immigration law firm in St. Louis that, like many clients and like Mike's old time jewelry store, may have had a location outside of the city center, in this case 20 miles outside of the city center. And this is an authoritative, very well respected firm, great links, great content, very positive reviews. And yet in the immigration space, it would only get so far. It couldn't reach into downtown from the suburbs. Not something surprising for most people watching here today, but something that no matter what was done, it really was not allowing for people downtown to see that this was a great option. As you know, if you look at Google, it's looking for great answers to questions. It was not finding it. Google was not giving them a shot because they were so far outside of the city center. What we did see was that for terms that were not immigration, but might be visa or citizenship, that those terms were possible to be found closer to downtown. Not as strong, but that when you didn't have an option as a business to pick immigration lawyer, that the terms that may be under that umbrella had a better shot of resonating from an office outside the city center. That the power of having the name, the GMB profile, that is something that allowed us greater latitude. However, when they finally decided to get an office downtown, signed a lease, and opened up downtown, that was the game changer. Shouldn't be a surprise, but it's just really powerful to see what a relatively short period of time, when you have the authority of the site, that there's only so much that can be done from outside of the city center, and that when you finally get something downtown, that it did not take a long time for that to gain the traction, but that it was really, you can huff and puff and do everything you want, but there's nothing like that physical proximity. And that as Google has moved more and more into what I think of as the demonopolization of local search, they're trying to be more egalitarian and not allow any one person to dominate an entire market. It's making it more and more important to think about locations, where you are, and that as you look at what those most important factors are, the address, the physical address that you have in the city, and all these other GMB categories, that you are left with a situation where, if as Google has tried to squeeze more monetization at the top of the SERPs, what we're seeing is that as we continue to look at people's operations, that things that may have worked a few years ago, where you could own a city from a given location, that really isn't possible anymore. And that what used to be, hey, if you put the resources and blew your competition away with authority, that you really had that juggernaut, that right now Google is weighing locations so carefully. And that the good news is that when you have clients who are either haven't been at this for years or don't have the resources to play against dominant players, that what that allows you to do is own an area and have that proximity outside of a city center, and create a very good ROI for clients that before a dominant player really wasn't allowing that. So while they've taken away that ability to own everything, I think the positive part has been that it has given smaller players the ability to have their own fiefdom, possibly not right in the middle of downtown, but allowing them to have a population center. And it makes sense as Google saying, hey, what is that answer? And in the professional services space, what we're seeing is very often people are willing to drive further than they might be for a pizza or a cup of coffee, where they can get that great practitioner who gives them great service and a great value. However, I think that what Google is saying is, hey, we're going to show people who's close. We're still going to give a tremendous visibility to those dominant big legacy players. At the same time, it certainly has morphed, and that the location more important than ever, not necessarily a city center location, but where, a proximity and a radius from the locations that you do have. So, I geek out on this stuff. I'm always thrilled. My cell phone is here. If you ever want to call or text, I geek out on this stuff all the time. And I am so grateful to the Pubcon community for what we've gotten from this world, and how I've been able to build, grow, and share with others, that I would just love to return the favor. So thank you, Brett, for having me. This has been a great honor, and I hope that this is useful and we can continue the conversation offline.
That was a fantastic presentation. I would have to absolutely agree. I would love to see that Google guarantee pop up on organic. It would be a great way to combat spam, especially in niches like legal and home service, where it's just a major problem. So Really great insight. Fingers crossed on that one.
I think eventually that's going to happen. It seems hypocritical to have it, to have that trust factor and not allow it to be used here. I mean, you've seen the ad and the sponsored nomenclature get so faint. I would love to see at least a faint check mark or something to let people know, hey, these are guys that are playing by the rules.
I totally agree. That would be awesome. So we actually have some questions here. So here's a good one. We're going to pop this one up. What are some ways to go about getting spammy local listings removed? What's your favorite?
Well, look, I think of a lot of it as tried and true. You know, I'll sit there and change the name back. If it's a law firm that's just throwing that name out there, changing it back to the name of the firm. There's opportunities to report spam listings. It is I would say, they say vote early and often. I would say one thing is making sure that your extended circle, who's feeling that pain, lets people know, but doing it from authoritative accounts makes a big difference.
This is a good point. You know what? You can stop sharing your screen right there if you want to. It might pop your face up a little bit more. Thank you. Perfect. All right. So if I'm already running a traditional PPC campaign, should I redirect all funds to LSA? What would you recommend?
Short term, I don't think that's necessarily a terrible idea. Right now, the ROI from the LSA is significantly better than PPC. Now, like most things, it's going to be a marketplace and it may shift. Right now, there is opportunity in LSA, and I see people that are not playing PPC putting money into LSA. So I don't want to be like the sort of Google huckster for LSA. It's working. And for the time being, particularly in the contingency world, I think in the fee for service world where somebody has to pay for an immigration case or trust in a state, you got to be careful because depending on your price point, your value proposition, and if you have a machine inside your organization to take leads in and convert them, which you may not be focused on as much if you're not used to doing paid search, it may not work as well. That said, what I would say is it is really important right now to look at your market and see, is this a buying opportunity? And for many people, it has been.
That's a really good point. So based on local 3-pack filtering, what is the best way to make sure I'm ranked locally?
Well, we're talking about filtering, and it's very frustrating. What I would say is it's thinking about this before you sign a lease. There are a lot of people that just sign a lease and say to their digital marketing company, "Hey, I'm there." No, our rule is we work as partners with our clients, and we want to know what they're thinking. And so we have a policy that before they sign a lease, they need to bring it to us so that we can go through this checklist, look at what the competition is. Again, there may be no good answer. It may be that there's a lawyer in every building that does what you do. It's only for your type of law. But if you can avoid major known problems, it's hard enough doing digital marketing. There's so many variables. Google's always changing and moving the goal lines, right? The last thing you want is a known problem. So why put yourself in that position? Spend some time up front and make sure that you're evaluating what that location means.
That is a really good point. It's funny as we have to think about these things now. Didn't used to be, and used to come to your SEO complaining, why aren't we ranking local? Well, you need to move buildings. I mean, you can only imagine, but it's true. Location is really important.
No, and it's very frustrating. There are times I've told people it's time to move. If you're the new kid on the block, why are you going to fight this uphill battle? Again, if you're not a referral based firm, who cares? But if you want, we have enough information, and that, at least in the major markets, people are working remotely now anyway. Like, figure out, like, as you're planning your 2021, making sure that's part of the brain trust.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. So last one here we got. Do you think LSAs will have a greater effect on organic search down the road?
I can't think, I assume they will. Everything that's going on, like we have Google wishing to raise revenue. Obviously, that's always there. Right. So as the cynical side of me says, yes, they will cut into organic over time. The flip side is we're seeing a lot in the antitrust space for the first time. Now, under Republican administration, less likely to see that. Democratic administration, more likely. I know in the Obama election, Google donations played a large role, and that we really didn't see Google touched at all. But we're starting to see states looking into this. And it's fascinating what in the last few months is going on, so that if there's now, like we've seen in Europe, if we now see a thumb on that antitrust scale, I could see them not, again, I've always assumed they'd stay a little bit soft on lawyers, in the sense that the last thing you want to do is anger a bunch of people that could make your life more difficult.
Right.
And I feel like it's one thing to push the needle, but if they push it too far and put people's backs against the wall, I see they're being pushed back. We're seeing on the state level already. I have no doubt that it will cut into organic. The question is how far and at what point.
Fantastic. Well, amazing presentation. If you guys want to reach out and connect with Seth, we put his information up there. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. And we got some more questions if we have some time, Brett, are we?
I think that wraps us up. We're right at 30 minutes. So I think that's great. I appreciate it, Seth. Thank you so much.
I got to tell you, I know I said it there, but Brett, I just want to say it with you on camera, me here looking at you, like, again, how full circle this is. This is just like, literally, I went to a I used to go to legal conference, and I wrote in my book SEO, and like just circled it. That was what I had to learn. And the way I learned it was I came to Pubcon. I sat there, took notes, listened to you, Joe, and others. And, and really that was what got me to build my firm from 2 to 40 lawyers, and what got me an agency. And I wouldn't have it had I not gotten on a plane and come to Pubcon.
You know what I tell everybody, Seth, is all we ask is 1%, just 1%. I appreciate it.
I really, it is really, you've built something very special, and I just, it chills to be here.
Okay. I appreciate it. Hope to see you at the next one, Seth.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time. All right.